All right, if you're tuning in, then this is a quick review of how to round to the nearest whole number, to the nearest tenth, and to the nearest hundredth. And so we have gone over this. We do have some notes in our spiral, but I wanted to make sure that everybody remembered what to do. So let me get this focused in a little bit better. There we go, and we'll get started. So whenever we're rounding to the nearest whole number, the first thing that we want to do is we want to label those places. So we want to label the places, and we're going to just start with the digit to the left of the decimal point. So we have our ones place, we have our tens place, and then behind the decimal we have our tenths, our hundredths, and our thousandths. And if we're rounding to the nearest whole number, then that means that I am going to be looking at this information right here. All right, so when I think about rounding, I want to think about, well, what am I closer to? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the digit that's in front of my circle, I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to keep the digit that's in the circle. So we're either rounding this to 65 or the very next whole number, which would be 66. Then what I want to do is I want to create a midpoint. I want to think about what could be between 65 and 66. So something that would be between, especially if I think about money, would be 65.5. Now all I need to do is I need to think about, well, where would 65.2 or 65 and 2/10 fall? And it really doesn't matter what these numbers are. I mean, I could use them, but I just need to think about, does 2/10 fall before the midpoint or after the midpoint? So it does fall before the midpoint. 65 and 273 thousandths is going to fall before the midpoint. And when I put that on my number line, I can see very clearly that I'm closer to 65. So I can round this number to 65. When I look at the very next number, we have 65 and 273 thousandths, and I want to round to the nearest tenth. Now I'm going to start with the digit in the tenths place. And since I've already labeled the ones above, I can just go ahead and know that 2 is in the tenths place. So again, I'm going to make my endpoints. Whenever I circle a number that I'm going to be rounding to, I keep all the digits in front of that circle. So this will be 65 and 2/10. I want to think about what would be the very next tenth. So the very next tenth would be 65 and 3/10. If I add a quick 0, and I think about this being 20 hundredths, and I think about this being 30 hundredths, finding that midpoint will make it very easy. So what could be between 20 hundredths and 30 hundredths? That's right, it could be 65 and 25 hundredths. Now all I need to do is think about, well, where would 27 hundredths fall? 27 hundredths is going to fall behind that midpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly jot that here and think about, well, what am I closer to? I'm closer to 65 and 30 hundredths. So this number will round to 65 and 3/10. Going on to our last example, we have 65 and 275 thousandths, and we're going to be rounding to the nearest hundredth. Again, since I've already labeled the places above, I know that the 7 is in the hundredths place. So I'm going to circle the digit in the hundredths place. And when I circle those numbers, that will help me find my endpoints easily. So I have 65.2, and we're going to keep the 7. So that's 65 and 27 hundredths. And so I have to think about what would be the very next hundredth. The very next hundredth would be 65 and 28 hundredths. If I add a quick 0, that becomes 270 thousandths, and this becomes 280 thousandths. So making my midpoint, I would be thinking about, well, what could be between 270 thousandths and 280 thousandths? That's right. It would be 65 and 275 thousandths. And when I think about where 73 would fall, 73 would fall right about here. 65 and 273 thousandths, which means that when I'm rounding to the nearest hundredth, this number right here, 65 and 27 hundredths, is the closest number. I hope that this helped you review and remember how we round numbers.